Hi everyone, welcome to the Icehouse Podcast. I'm Bryar Stewart, the Community Manager at the Icehouse, and today I'm very excited to be talking to Michael McLachlan, who is my manager, the Marketing Manager here at the Icehouse, and is celebrating 3 years at the Icehouse tomorrow actually, so that's pretty exciting. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome, we're going to get into it. And as you know, I like to start with some quick fire questions, and it's just a nice way to warm up, get to know someone. First things first, podcast or book that you recommend?
Book. Jim Collins' Good to Great. I went on a leadership development program, which is a program course the Icehouse offers. I did that just over a year ago, and it's the one book they say at the very beginning, this is what people should at least read before a program or at least during a program. And me being me, I was like, I've got to do that. So I've got to listen to it. So I listened to it, and it really resonated with me as well. So I brought a lot of those kind of concepts into, I've tried to bring them into the marketing team and also the wider team as well. And podcasts, to be honest, even though I launched this the idea of this podcast a year and a half ago, I don't really listen to podcasts. Yeah. I listen to the clips. If I'm on YouTube and I see some clips of a podcast, I'll listen to them. But I don't tend to listen to podcasts. But I love my audiobooks. Yeah. And I tend to go in between fiction, non-fiction, fiction, non-fiction. I kind of swap between. But yeah, Jim Collins' Good to Great is an amazing book. Yeah.
Awesome, love the answer. When are you most productive? You're a very productive person. When are you most productive?
The morning, definitely. There's even a part of me that would like to start at 5:30 in the morning.
Wow.
And just have my headphones on when there's 2-3 hours where there's no one in the office and just smash out the work. And then once people start coming into the office and people just want to chat and stuff as they do in the morning, I feel a little bit more okay to do that and that kind of thing. Because I'm a very funny person that even when I owned and run my own businesses, anytime I was having just random conversations, whether it be with customers or other staff members, I'd feel bad. I'd be like, I shouldn't be working. I should be doing something productive. So I find if I'm just really productive in the morning, and that's when I feel productive, then I feel a bit more okay in the afternoons to kind of be a bit more chilled out and relaxed. Mm-hmm. So very much morning. I'm a morning person. Very much for productivity.
On the other hand, when are you most relaxed?
Probably when you got home from work, if you've got nothing to do, and that first sit down on the couch and just put your feet up and just kind of relax, that's probably when I'm most relaxed. Yeah. Or on a holiday, but everyone's relaxed on a holiday, which is always good. Yeah,
for sure. If you could invite one person to dinner, dead or alive, who would that be?
Two come to mind: Bruce Lee and Bill Hicks. Bill Hicks is a comedian, and Bruce Lee, of course, is action star. Just their philosophies, quite different, but also very very much resonate with me for sure. And funny enough, both of them have passed away. But I think if it was people who really resonate in my brain, it would be one of those two. I think. Mm-hmm. Again, who knows what we'd actually talk about? But sometimes the reality is very different than than what you think have in your brain. But yeah, I think one of those two people would be great to talk with.
Yeah, I love that answer. But I've heard a quote of someone saying never meet your
Never. Well, they say it so often. Never meet your heroes.
Yeah.
Or if you're just not even a hero, if you're just a celebrity fan, and so often people meet celebrities that they're fans of, and it's not a good experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean that happens all the time, right? I go, I really like listening to this person, or I think I like what this person thinks. But you might have a conversation and realize, there's actually nothing out. There's no other connection there other than you like what they think.
Yeah.
So there's no kind of spark. But end of the day, that's maybe why I've chosen two dead people, because there's no chance of that. There's no chance of that ever happening.
That's awesome. Were you born with your strengths, do you think, or have you developed them?
That's a really interesting one, because I'm a big believer in both nature and nurture for sure. But my strength, I've got to say it's got to be nurture for me, because but it could be nature, right? Because it comes from your parents.
Yeah.
That the workaholic part of me has definitely been ingrained in me from family, but that may not be nurture. That may be nature, because they were born workaholics and they just became workaholics and they had me and I became a workaholic. So I don't know in that regard, but I would say my strengths, I've got some things I just know, just me. I look at my family and I go, no one in my family taught me this or that.
Yeah.
Or I think I've just picked up something along the way. But I think those ingrained things in me are definitely just what I've been brought up, for good or bad, there's good stuff and there's the bad stuff that you become a bit more aware of. But my strengths, I think it's mainly nurture. Mainly nurture, and then maybe nurture a bit more for my own development as I've gotten older. And you start to gravitate to certain ideas and certain things that you go, I like that, and then you bake it into who you are. So I think nurture's probably where I'd kind of leave on that one.
Yeah, awesome answer. First ever job.
I guess, not including like pamphlet runs and stuff like that when I was a kid, which I hated. My first job, I was 14 or 15 in New World. It was the local New World. Yeah. My dad, especially being an entrepreneur himself and owning businesses, was always very strict that we have to have jobs. There was no kind of just slacking off, not doing anything.
No way.
And to be honest, it was a horrible experience. I was only there for about 3 months. I was studying fifth forms, which is year 11 or year 10, and they I was in the produce department, and they were getting me to work 4 days a week. And I was about to start school, and I was doing 4 days a week, like 20-hour weeks. And I was 15. And long story short, it was the first job I ever quit. I remember talking to the owner. I just said to them, you can fire me, or you can accept my, me quitting on the spot now. But one way or another, I'm not coming back. Here I was a 15-year-old talking to the owner of the supermarket, and he just turned around and said, "You're fired." Then it's like, great. And I walked out the door. So that wasn't a great experience. But then I got another job at Pack and Save, funnily enough, doing the same thing.
Competitor.
Much better experience, and that was my high school job for the rest of high school.
Oh wow, cool. Love that. Okay. Looking forward to diving deeper now, and we're going to touch on a few different things. Marketing strategy being one, your attendance in the leadership development program, and just different topics which I know you're passionate about.
Cool.
But wanted to start with this open question that I love hearing how people's responses are. Tell us about yourself. Who is Michael?
Well, some of these who was Michael I've kind of come to realise only recently, really, and funnily enough, part of it was LDP. But
cool.
I'm an introvert. Always know I've been an introvert, but around people I know well, I'm the classic extrovert, I can be the life of the party kind of thing around certain people.
Yeah.
But one thing I've learned through LDP is that I always knew my brain was different. I always just operated slightly differently. And I always wondered why and those sorts of things. And through the LDP leadership development program process, some conversations were held between different participants about stuff and how people see the world differently. And they even do a little... not a game, a thing where it's, I can't remember who does it, but she stands up and goes, and depending on how you answer a question, you go to the one side of the room or the other side of the room, and they go, okay, you're introverts, you're extroverts. And they ask the same question, like, when you think of a flame, what do you think? And then they write down what they think, they write down what they think, and you realise how different that is. And it's all around communication, how extroverts and introverts just literally see the same thing, a flame, as very different. The creative people, it wasn't introverts, extroverts, it was creative versus technical, etc.
Yeah.
And like flame, to the technical people, it's fire, it's hot, that kind of thing. But to the creative people, it's romance, it's it's lighting darkness, a bit more emotive kind of things. So through that kind of process and through a few other things, I realised, I really do feel like I see things differently in how I operate, especially with me being an introvert. And I thought, do I sit on the autism spectrum? And I did a couple of online tests, like the official ones that the medical schools kind of do, and both put me in the exact same category. So two completely separate tests kind of put me in the same place. And I actually went to the doctor, and they said, look, if you want to get fully diagnosed as an adult, it takes a long process. They said it's actually not really worth it. If it's not affecting your life in an overly negative way, don't worry about it. So I technically kind of self-diagnosed, semi-officially diagnosed that I'm on the autism spectrum as well as introvert. So that's how I kind of operate the way I kind of do. Like, I love my alone time, I love doing my own thing, I'm super fine by myself, spend time with my partner, whatever it may be. But if I'm with the right people, then the real me is there, and I kind of really enjoy that as well. So there's that. So I guess that was kind of like a really interesting way to kind of realise who I am. And here I am at 41. I would have been 40 probably when I discovered that. And it's kind of cool that you can still be that deep into, sure, people might be laughing at that because in the 60s still going through discoveries, and that's what I want to be. I want to be discovering who Michael is for the rest of my life. But it was quite freeing. It was quite freeing when I kind of made that discovery and kind of realised it's okay that I see the world differently, and the way I am wired makes me really good at certain things and makes me bad at other things. Like, I have zero interest in networking. Like, going to networking events, I'm really forcing myself to be talking to random people and that kind of thing. But I know that the positive side will put me in the upper echelon of a certain skill set because I can do certain things that other people can't, or I can see things that other people can't. So I've learned to embrace it. And I'll still work on my weaknesses, but there's certain weaknesses I'll just go, that's just who I am, and it might be detrimental for me to go above and beyond to try and fix it when I can't fix it because it's literally how my brain is wired. So who I am, I guess I'm someone who's I'm a very passionate person. I'm someone who's very highly motivated by not getting into trouble, meaning that I'll quite often follow the rules very, very closely. But in a working environment, it means if I have expectations on me, I am going to make sure that happens. Like, I have nothing more horrible than the feeling of walking into a meeting knowing they're going to talk about 3 things and 2 things I haven't even started on. I can't do that. I walk in, those 3 things are done. Maybe the results weren't as good as we hoped or whatever it may be, but I'm earnest and I go, hey, I did my best, here's the results and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I hate the idea of not, letting someone down or getting into trouble as well, and I think that's a huge part of me as well. But I'm someone who, as I said, I really do enjoy my relaxing time as well, so I'm someone who works hyper-focused when I'm at work. When I'm not at work, I'm very chilled, very relaxed. I can quite happily, have a nice relaxing weekend just as much as going out and, doing something fun or adventurous. But I definitely need that alone, relaxing time to kind of recharge, ready for my hyper focus once I hit work.
Yeah, very cool. Very thorough understanding of who you are, like great self-awareness, which I don't think people do have, but not everyone has that level of self-awareness, I don't think. And it's quite cool you've been able to put language around a few things that before you're probably like, I know this is part of who I am, but what is this? Okay.
Yeah, I guess that comes from absorbing a lot of books as well, because because sometimes you don't go out of your way to learn something about yourself. Like, it could be any kind of type of book. You could be listening to a business management leadership book, and for some reason on a certain chapter they talk about a certain thing, and it just resonates. You're like, yeah, that's me. And it may not be a leadership quality, but it may be a really deep dive into, it might be them telling the story of someone they're working with that had an issue that helped, and then they fixed it to become a better leader, and you're like, I have that issue. So I think by absorbing so much information, you should be reflecting that onto yourself and how to become a better person, a better leader. And I think that's a really important thing as well, is that if you're trying to become better, you've got to be better at everything. You can't just go, I'm a really good person, but I'm terrible at my work, so I'm going to keep trying to do better at my personal life and not my work life. It's like, if you want to become better at everything, you've got to be better at everything. So I always find it funny when you see these people who are they absorb 1,000 business books, but their personal life is a mess. Or they're reading every single self-help book there is, but in a work environment, they're lazy, they're argumentative, there's all the kind of negative kind of qualities. So I always feel that, and I guess that's kind of where I've got to, and I never want to stop. Just want to keep absorbing interesting information and become a better person in every facet of my life. So that way I have no one to blame. If something's not good in my life, or there's something I don't like about who I am, it's on me. It's on me to kind of fix that in my life, or fix that in me and become better. And if you're not going to take that ownership, then it's then you can't. I kind of feel like you can't complain about it. Yeah. And so many people complain about stuff in their life without taking any action. So I guess I am quite self-aware of my strengths and weaknesses, and then try to work on them. And if I can't work on them, just absorb information and become more aware of them.
Yeah, brilliant. Love that. Give us a bit of a brief overview of what your career journeys looked like, because I know it's an interesting one, and how that actually led to now your role as marketing manager at the Icehouse.
Yeah, so it's funny because my career, it had one focus since I was a kid, and that was film, TV, something to do with film, TV, or video production. And I was 4 years old when my older brother, who was 10 at the time, was getting me involved in just the classic home movies. My parents owned a hi-fi store, so this was talking about the 80s. So in Hamilton, and we were the first family in Hamilton to own a video camera, the first family in Hamilton to own a microwave, just all these kind of random things because of my dad's business. And so clearly in the early 80s and mid 80s, my dad would have to bring home a video camera, the classic one that would sit on your shoulder and kind of thing. And my brother clearly gravitated towards that and the idea of telling stories and those sorts of things. So at 4, I started getting involved in very minor ways, but at 6 years old, that's when I got really heavily involved in just making these kind of homemade videos and action videos and horror films and all this kind of stuff.
So cool.
And so that just kind of was for the next, 12 years. And so once university kind of came onto the cards, I was like, I've been very heavily ingrained in this kind of world, in a non-professional way, just in a very much homemade way. But then I was like, what's the next step for me? And I had 2 other interests in my life. One was, the Air Force, and one was archaeology. Those are 2 big interests of me. And I was like, okay, well, I've got 3 options. I can go down the archaeology route, the Air Force route, or the, just university film, TV route. And I remember it was the same day. I got the application back from the Air Force saying I wasn't accepted as a fighter pilot, but I was accepted to go into the Air Force to find a career there. That's not as a fighter pilot. And I was bummed. I was gutted by that. I was really gutted because that's what I really wanted to try. And then I also got the application from University of Waikato saying you're accepted into university. So I was like, okay, this makes a natural kind of thing. And they didn't have a really good archaeology program, so I was just going to go into film TV. And but it was a good decision because I think it was 6 months later, a year later, New Zealand government made the decision to get rid of the air wing of the Air Force. So even if I had been accepted, I would have been a year into my training to become a fighter pilot, only for them to go, we're getting rid of all our fighter planes. Wow. But that journey into film and TV, studying it, that kind of then very quickly led into the professional side. So I started my first business, it was either the first year or second year of uni. I can't remember, it was one of those 2. So I was still doing film projects on the side with my brother. But then video production was, because how do you make money? When you're studying and you're wanting to do film TV, you do video production. So, you get a camera where you can and you go film some stuff and you edit it and you've credited an ad for someone or whatever it may be. So that's kind of where my first kind of business came from. And again, had got that entrepreneurial spirit ingrained in me by my dad especially, and my mum to a certain degree. So it felt very natural to do my own thing. So really, my film career and that kind of thing just kind of went that way until my early 30s. So it was about 13 years of that. And, again, it was some film, some TV, some video production. I owned my own businesses. I managed other people's production businesses. So it was a whole bunch of activity. And that whole time, my brother was mainly full-time in the industry in the stunt world and some acting. So he was doing, Lord of the Rings and X-Men and doing all these massive projects, sometimes around the world. And I was his producer. So I was the one, kind of had the day job, and the day job was often video production of my own companies or managing other companies. And then on the side would be doing our own personal films. So I was doing, I was used to doing a full day's worth of work, coming home, on the phone with my brother, and then for 2 or 3 hours each night talking about our projects, working on our projects, etc. So that was us for a very long time. But along the way, you learn every single skill. You learn how to sell yourself, how to market yourself, how to build a business, how to do the finances, how to do every single thing, and manage people. If you're on a film set and you're a producer, you've hired 10, 15 people, and you're at that point you're the GM or CEO technically of a project, and so in a business sense. And so you just end up having to learn how to manage large amounts of people in a very different, from a Sparky who's there to help, fix the lights, to make sure the lighting's working, which is not super creative, it's more of a technical job, to a very creative, actor or actress who, who has very temperamental can be very temperamental. So you have to learn how to deal with very interesting, diverse kind of personalities. So once that kind of came to an end, because my brother kind of got burnt out from the industry, we just filmed our second feature film. Filmed it, not finished it, just filmed it. And he got burnt out. He retired. He still does stunts, but we kind of retired from our filmmaking. Wow. And I was like, wow, I've been doing this since I was 32. I'm not sure how old I was. Maybe I was 32. I was like, professionally, I've been doing this for 14 years, and unprofessionally, I've been doing it since I was 6. Yeah. And I was like, for the first time, I can, since that decision of, if I still could have got onto the Air Force at that time. So since in 14 years, I was like, this is the first time I've actually had a chance to kind of do something very, very different. And so I kind of thought, I got excited by that. I was like, okay, cool. What have my skills taught me? And they taught me a lot of marketing, really. and a lot of and I was still a very creative person. I was a creative writer, and so that got me my first job in the corporate world. For it was an SME with a couple hundred staff, and I was working in the marketing team. I was a creative content writer. I can't remember what the title was, but anyway, that was my first normal job for a very, very long time. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. And then that company ran themselves into the ground, and they made like 1/3 of their staff redundant just after Christmas, and then they made the second third redundant about 6 months later. But I was in the first round, and I was like, but for me it was like, okay, it was a good experience to kind of see how badly businesses can be run. Because I had never really been exposed to businesses other than film, TV, and video production up to that point. And I moved back to Hamilton at the time, and there was this tech company, a mate of mine had helped start up called Real Clever. Now for years, I'd say for 2 years, 3 years leading up to that, they kept wanting me to be involved, and I kept going, no, I'm doing my film stuff. They kept going, be involved. I said, no, I'm doing my film stuff. And eventually they said, hey, we pivoted from Real Clever into a company called Indie Rain. So Indie Rain was video on demand, or not video on demand, it was kind of the pay VOD. So basically, it was a way for independent filmmakers to put their films online themselves and sell directly to customers. So as a customer, you could go on like a Netflix, but buy an independent film and you own the film. So they don't have to go through distributors anymore. They can sell directly to their customers. And I was like, you know what? I'm back in Hamilton. It's been 2 or 3 years of you guys asking me to kind of be involved. I'm kind of at loose ends. I'll come on as an advisor, and the film advisor, and help focus on your marketing, like their marketing manager. No, I had never had a marketing manager title before, anything like that, but I just, all the skills there.
Yeah, wow.
And that first 6 months, because they were still trying to raise money during those first 6 months. So they had money, I was getting paid, but they were still running off their last company's money, and they pivoted into a new company, and they were looking to raise cash. And I suddenly realized that, all the skills I've learned for the last 14 years are replicable, literally transferable over to this industry. Like, instead of working with a writer, I'm working with a designer. Instead of working with a technical person around sound or lighting, I'm working with a developer who's actually physically creating the product. And I'm like, oh, this is exactly the same kind of thing. So I flourished in that very quickly. And that was my first kind of foot in the door with tech startups. It was a tech startup. And they pivoted again, funnily enough, and I kind of helped them during that pivot. But I was there for 3 years, and I helped them raise their first round of funding, 1.2 million. I managed a team. I built a team. My first time I got to build a team outside of the film and TV world. Hired 3 marketers to kind of work underneath me. And that was a really interesting 2.5 years. I got to travel. I got to go to France. Got to go to Monaco for it. Wow. And it was a really, really, really cool time. And it was something I've always gravitated back to the idea of working for tech startups ever since then. And so after doing that for 3 years, went traveling for a bit, then came back with my partner at the time, and we're like, what next? And we decided to get into our own business and start our own business, because again, I had owned business for so many years that 3-year period of not owning my own business was kind of interesting as well. Yeah. And we decided to get into something completely random, and that was the gym and fitness industry. We knew a lot of people in the industry. We met at a gym, but we didn't know how to run a gym. But we did that for 5 years, and again, we were there every day, signing people up and part of the community, and did that whole kind of thing. And again, I handled sales, marketing, and the running the business, and she handled the sales side of it, and we had a third business partner who's kind of handling the higher end financial side of it when talking with banks, etc. But that was a pretty intense process, and the relationship didn't last that process either. Yeah. And so once that kind of ended, I realized that again it was time for a change again, and that's when I went back into my marketing career, because that was always the thing that I gravitated towards is marketing. So I became a international brand manager, became a global brand manager for like one of the world's largest home brewing companies or home distilling companies. So that was really interesting, but that job was more a stopgap. I knew I needed a job to get coming out of the gym. Yeah. But I did that for a year, and that got me really exposed to not just to the global market and how to market globally. We had 210 territories or something like that, so that was really interesting. And then that job led to where I am now. So that was 3 years ago that a job came up at the Icehouse, and my exposure to the Icehouse at that point was tech startups, and that's what I thought the Icehouse was. And I remember my first interview, they explained to me, the sales and marketing manager at the time, was like, there's two sides of the business. The startup side of the business and the growth side of the business, the education, and that's what I was interviewing for. And I remember going, I had no idea there was this whole education side of the business.
Wow.
But so I got the job as the digital marketing manager, and I won't go into the detail, but very early on, I got given basically not the title, but I got given the responsibility to take over the whole marketing function. And maybe just under a year after that fact, I got the official. Because that included COVID, so there's a lot of stuff happening at the time. I officially got promoted to marketing manager, and I've been doing that role for just over 2 years now. And so a very eclectic kind of job history. But one thing it's really taught me is that you're just learning stuff, and you can so easily transition that some knowledge into something completely different. And I think that's one of my biggest things. I had this with my partner actually. She's been in her role for 19 years at the University of Auckland, and she always goes, I could never work anywhere else because my skills can't go anywhere else. I'm like going, but you forget all those other things you have learned. And the last thing you want to do anyway is that see a job description and go, I take 100% of the boxes, I'm going to apply. But think about that. That means you're just going to have the same job in a different company. But you want to be pushed. You want to try something a little bit different. So if you see a job where you tick 60% of the boxes, 80% of the boxes, whatever it may be, and the other 20 or 40% you're like, I have no idea how to do any of that kind of stuff, those are the things that people should be putting themselves forward for, because you'll start to realize that you have skills that can be transferred, and it might take 3 weeks or 3 months or years to kind of fully for those skills to transfer over to the new role, but that's how you grow as a person and grow your career. So I'm really happy with my really eclectic career, and I've got people friends with from high school and actually friends from when I was kids to high school to university, and now they're like GM of Subaru Australia and the APAC marketing manager for Samsung, massive jobs, massive companies. And I always kind of look back and go, I know that would have been my trajectory if I had started that at my first year at university. But I look at it and go, no, I'm really content with the life I've had and the weird stuff I've learned and the things I've done to get to where I am now. So I feel incredibly equipped for the rest of my career, and as we talked earlier about books, that I'm arming myself all the time with more information and new ways to learn. So so that's kind of where I've kind of got to, and it is always funny talking to people for the first time, especially in job interviews where they go, so tell us about your past. Okay, well here's a bit of a quick. I mean, I'll tell them a lot shorter than this conversation, and they go, wow, okay, that's interesting. But sometimes that interesting part is what gets you the job, rather than I did normal A, normal B, normal C, and maybe here, and they go, okay, well you're the other 10 people who have applied for this role. So
Totally.
So that's my career journey today that got me to the Icehouse.
It's so interesting, and one thing picked up at the start of that story is really, from the get-go, you didn't follow the A to B. You actually went, these are my 3 passions in life. Which one of my passions am I going to follow? Where I think that's underestimated is that's different to how people do it. Normally they go, okay, what do we have to, what degree do I do? Do I do accounting or marketing or, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. Where you were like, these are my 3 passions. I know what they are. It's just a matter of which one I'm following, which I think is quite cool.
Oh, and don't get me wrong, there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of pressure from my family, my dad and my mum, to go do an absolutely normal, middle of the road education and get
linear look.
Exactly. And I was just it's just never interested me. And what made me more frustrated is that neither of my parents went to university, but here they were and my brother had gone to my sister didn't go to university, and my brother had studied acting, so he was a qualified actor, and I was like going, but why do you want me to go and do business or go and do accounting or something like that?
Totally,
so as I said, I just, for whatever reason, maybe my brother, maybe it wasn't nature in that kind of regard, but I always had that kind of no, I know what I like to do, and especially now, in hindsight, I cannot do something that I don't want to be doing. I can't, I give 110% no matter what. That's just what it is. So if I do something I hate or something I love, I still give 110%. But I will get beaten down so quickly, mentally, physically, everything, if I don't like what I'm doing. So in hindsight, I must have just known. I've got to do something I enjoy doing, and if I don't enjoy doing it, I got to get out of there as quickly as possible. For many reasons, for many reasons. I mean, I always feel like I'm going to leave whatever I'm doing better. Like I'm not going to do a bad job. That's why I need to get out. So even if I hate what I'm doing, I'm like, I'm going to leave this better, but I need to extract myself. So so maybe that's always been ingrained in me, and to go, no, I don't want to do that. I want to study film and TV and go on this really random journey for over those 14 years before getting onto a bit more of a normal journey. But even then, my first job then was straight into owning my own business for 5 years at gym. We literally built it from scratch. We moved from Hamilton to Whangaparoa. I lived in this small town up, Auckland, north of Auckland, and did that for 5 years, and
very cool.
It makes you who you are, I guess, and that's I can't complain of who I feel I am. So it's kind of like it was all meant to be. I can look at my friends, who did that linear, but that has had massive success, and you can't look on that as a negative thing. But I just went on a very different journey, and I'm happy where I am, and I'm sure it will continue to go in positive ways, and it was all meant to be.
Yeah. This role at the Icehouse Marketing Manager, how does it lean into your personal purpose?
That's an interesting question. So, I mean, for me, coming from a creative background, I'm a storyteller. That, like, my creative talents, like, I was a producer, so I always had 1 foot in the creative, 1 foot in the technical. So the producing was the technical. But the creative part, I loved writing. I was a creative writer, and I loved editing. So I was a film editor, and that was always I hated sound, hated everything else, but I just liked telling stories through pictures and those kind of things. So I think in marketing, I gravitate very much to storytelling, and it's like that. And that I always put that front and center. Like, I'm not here to go, champion. We are the best, and you must believe we're the best, and here's the story to tell you that. I'm like, no. This is what we do here, right? Yeah. We tell our customer stories. And in fact, we don't even tell our customer stories. We let them tell their own stories. We go, here's a podcast, and you just speak. Tell us about yourself, your business, and we put that out as content. Kiwi business story, interview an alumni. Tell us about your business, tell us about yourself, and great, we put it out there. Yeah. And that to me has always been what I've gravitated myself towards the most, is just telling really authentic stories of our customers. So I think that's what, I can't remember what the actual frame of the question was, but I guess that's kind of how I sum up my marketing life. Like, if I went to go, and then I guess that's one of the reasons why I struggled. I definitely didn't struggle, but I wasn't that ingrained with the company I worked with before. It was alcohol. I'm not a drinker. And I also have some personal feelings around alcohol, and it's definitely not a positive again, you don't want to demonize something completely, but if you look at it as a whole, it doesn't really add. There's more negative than there's positive. Yeah. And so it's really hard to tell those stories of a product that you don't really believe in, you don't consume yourself, and those sorts of things. Yeah. Which is why I know if whatever I'm doing in a marketing sense or managing a team sense, you've got to be passionate about what you do, about the product and the purpose, and I have a big passion about the purpose we have, and the fact that we help people be better at what they do. And as I said earlier, I love improving myself all the time, so it's kind of cool that we get to help improve our business owners. And so in a marketing sense, then you've got to hire the right people, and you've got to do the right tactical work, who they understand the same thing. They like telling our customer stories. It's not about putting us front and center, and they're passionate about genuinely helping people. So so I've completely forgotten the frame of the question, awesome. But I guess that's kind of the ethos of myself as a marketing manager.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was, how does marketing lean into your purpose, and I think that's exactly it. So someone lands a role as marketing manager of an SME business. What's your advice on where they should start in crafting that new marketing strategy? Where do they start? Yeah,
it's an interesting one, because again, that you can answer that in so many different ways, because the reality is that someone walks in, you've just been hired, right? You walk in, so there's so many contexts they need to understand. What happened before? Where is the business currently at? Because a massive thing I believe in, and this is there's a few people talk about this. Seth Collins is one of them as well. Is that there's momentum behind anything, good or bad. Sometimes it can be, you've really done some terrible things, and the terrible things keep happening, and otherwise it can be positive things. is that the last thing you want to do is come in and get your ego involved and go, we're stopping everything, and now it's going to be all me and all my ideas, and everything before was shit. So that's the one thing you don't want to be doing, unless you know full well you're coming into a nightmare and you come in to fix things. That's very different.
Yeah.
So for me, it's very much keep your ego out of it and go, what does this brand, this company actually need? It's such an important thing, because you'll be amazed how many people just bring their ego to work every day, not just to how they interact with their fellow co-workers, but how they bring that to strategy and tactics. Like, you always think people doing mostly best practice, and that's what they do, but not just in a marketing sense, but it's amazing how many people go, no, I want to do this or this or this, and it's not based on anything other than just them wanting to do that. So get the lay of the land, figure out what's happened before, and in fact keep the engine going, keep things going as they are, and then slowly but surely figure out what you need to change and update. That may be bringing more resource into the company to kind of, to look after certain things. That might be actually, you not being not so hands-on. I think a marketing manager, again, people, non-marketing people think this is semantics, but there's a big difference between a marketing manager and a head of marketing or a CMO or something like that. So for me, as currently as a marketing manager, 20% of my role is very hands-on, 80% of it is high-level strategy and managing the team, making sure things are happening. And people need to figure out who they are, because you can be a marketing manager of one, which means you're doing everything. You're coming up with strategy and you're literally doing the social posts. And then there are people who are marketing managers who don't do any actual physical tactical work, but are doing all the strategy. But for me, that's not a marketing manager anymore. Yeah. At that point, you are now a head of marketing. You are now focusing on high level strategy and what I feel like is some of the most important things, because that is what's happening now, what's happening in 6 months, and what's happening in 6 years. Yeah. And if you're a marketing manager and you're really hands on every day, all you're thinking about is what's happening today. Maybe what's happening next week. If you're really lucky, what's happening next month. It's so hard to kind of think further forward as well. So my advice is for marketing managers to just really get a lay of the land of the brand, make sure you don't bring your ego involved, and make sure you're making the right decisions for the company. And sometimes people go, is that the right decision for you or the company? And as long as you can defend that idea that no, this is the right decision for the company, it may benefit my role, it may benefit me and less work or whatever it may be, but it's the right decision for the company. I think always come from that angle as well. And just keep learning. Things change so quickly in marketing, and also I'll say this: be prepared to fight many battles, because digital marketing especially, it's so more complex. It's like old school marketing was so straightforward. Do a radio ad, do a TV commercial, do something in print or a magazine. It was so straightforward. But now with emails and social and everything else, that a website, how important websites are, and how it's not just about having this thing that lives on the website. It needs to be updated constantly, and the metrics involved, and how Google changes things, and Apple's now changing things of how you track things. It's way more complicated than people realize, especially if you want it to work right. So even if you get it, even if you understand it, even if your team understand it, just be prepared that it's a never-ending battle, often in business, to convince other people that the decisions you're making, that the resources you may need, that the money you're going to be spending is incredibly important, whether from its data integrity, whether it's as I said, new resource being hired, whether it be a process changing. That stuff, it's never ending. It's a never ending process. It's a never ending process of convincing people it needs to be done. And that can be tough.
On that note, and thanks for your honesty, what's a misconception of marketing or marketing, let's say, that you'd like to debunk?
I don't think it's really. I don't think I'll be the definitely first person to bring this up, but marketing is still seen as like the people who do the colouring in and you guys have an easy job. You're just doing social posts and those sorts of things, but the irony being is that, especially at my level and how my brain works, I'm very analytical. I'm very creative, very analytical.
Much, yeah.
And when you have someone that kind of way, being very analytical, people who aren't into marketing or who definitely don't understand the analytical part of it, and not just a marketing thing, analytics and how marketing affects sales, it affects operations, it affects so many parts of the business, that it can overwhelm people. It can overwhelm people when they realize how complicated it is. Like what marketing technically does, very straightforward. Sending emails, making sure you have a website that looks good, making sure your social has a good presence, doing public, like there's a lot. Like you can literally go, there's a huge amount, it's a huge volume, but people just really don't understand the level of complexity, especially if you want to do it right. Because sometimes you can look at one channel, website. Okay, let's get the website right, but how does that impact your search, your SEO results, your search? Okay, and then how does that impact the digital ads you have playing on your search, on your SEM strategy? Like, it's a really holistic. It's way more complicated than people realize. And I think a lot of companies that don't invest in their marketing team properly think of it as a very simple, straightforward thing. We just need someone to send out emails and make sure we got the lights on. That's how they're going to see it.
Yes.
But if they want to do it right, you need to have a really holistic approach, because sometimes when you come in and go, we're going to completely change option A, if you don't have the right people involved to tell you, well, that's going to break B and C, then that's going to dive into changing A, and then 6 days, 6 hours, 6 days, 6 months later, you go, oh geez, that's broken B and C. Oh geez, we didn't realize that. And they go, let's try and fix B. And again, they haven't invested correctly, and so they fix B. So A's working well, B's not working well, C's still broken, now they broke D. And so, if you have the right skills and the right mindset at the very beginning to understand how this stuff works, instead of diving in and fixing A, go, okay, A does need to be looked at. You can't do that because it's going to break B, C, and I can see if they eventually break D. Instead, let's do this. Let's do this. That won't break B. It will affect C, but in a small way, which we can manage, and we'll change the strategy there. And D never got onto the table because we didn't do the crazy stuff with A.
Yeah.
At that level of complexity, that's where businesses need to be. That's where digital is. That's where, marketing, yes, people shouldn't separate marketing and digital marketing. It's marketing. Yeah. It's just that digital is such a huge part of it now. So the misconception, again, I think that's the question is that people need to understand how complicated this is these days, and you cannot be doing things without thinking about how it affects everything, and not just talking about marketing, how that then affects leads or ops coming in for sales team, or how that affects the operations team when it comes to phone calls coming through. There's so many things that can affect, and a business really needs to kind of put as a priority digital, and marketing is a huge part of that, really front and center. And it's not just have someone keep the lights on and just hire the most junior person you can, and expect them to do an amazing job.
Yeah, I think it's a really cool thought around how you're creative and analytical, because I see that in how you manage and how you build strategies, and it's such an amazing skill set to have both, because sometimes you have one or the other and it works, but having both is incredible. So
there's a great quote. I don't like the person. It's a great quote. It's like my facts and figures don't care about your thoughts and feelings. And I love that idea. Is that I come to the table with his ideas, sometimes very creative, but with facts and figures to back them up. Not I think and feel we should do this, but what's the evidence behind that? And if you dive into the evidence, you might find that actually this has been done 100 times before by 100 other companies, and the results are horrible. So you've got to come to the table with facts and figures, even if you've got a really creative marketing idea, to back it up. And I think that's kind of my that's probably the bedrock of how I operate. If I'm going to come to the table with an idea, I want to have ammunition to go, this is why we're doing it, and it's proven, so it's still. Yeah,
I love that. That's really cool. I'm going to do a part 2 of this convo, because there's a whole nother string that I want to do in terms of my questioning. But I want to finish on this one, which is, because our conversation's been quite, you're a marketing manager, advice for marketing managers. What would be your essential toolkit for a marketing manager in terms of, it might be Salesforce, it might be like actual tools that you would use on the daily or monthly?
Your CRM has to be bulletproof, and the data that's been put into that CRM has to be bulletproof, because that sets you up for everything else. That, how you communicate, who you're communicating to, what messaging you're saying to that person. So if you're CRM, whether it's Salesforce or a HubSpot or whatever it may be, make sure it's good. Make sure you have one, and make sure it's a good one, and make sure it's the right one for you. Yeah. There's a great saying that there's no point having a Porsche if you don't have a license, because you've got this great thing you don't know how to use. It's like, well, what's the point? Yeah. So make sure if you're going to have a CRM or the right CRM, that it's the right one for you, and you have the right resources in the company to get the most out of of it. Once you have that set up, make sure you have the right processes in place to make sure the data is good.
Yeah.
And the next thing is your website. Don't just have a website that you just build and you walk away from. Your website, depending on the company, of course, it needs to be an ever-breathing thing, and it's the thing that people come to, first, more often than not, come to first before they pick up a phone to kind of, reach out to you. So make sure your CRM's good, make sure you've got your website in check, and then you have your socials, and then make sure they're all connected. Maybe your website's literally on your CRM, built in the same tool as your CRM. Make sure your socials are embedded so that when it comes to digital automation, those are all working. So CRM, website, and your socials, and you're pretty much on your way there to kind of having the right tools in place. But I won't talk about actual products because everyone's got their favorite products they actually want to use to kind of make sure they get the job done. But those are the essential products.
That's cool. Let's finish with this one, and maybe another time we'll talk about your experience on our leadership development program and what you got from that. But what excites you the most about the future of the Icehouse?
I guess what excites me the most for the future is just this continued impact on the actual SME sector.
Awesome.
And I'm doing a lot of work on trying to, this might be a bit too much of a peek behind the curtain into us focusing and being a bit more focused on who we actually work with as far as demographics go. Because I feel like we should be working with the companies that can have the biggest impact. So not only can we teach this amazing information to these people and they go back and build it into their company, if those type of companies can then actually make an impact on themselves and thus the economy around them or the local area around them, community, then I feel that has an amazing impact on New Zealand. So that's what excites me.
Awesome.
So the continued impact that we have on the New Zealand economy, and
Yeah, very, very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you, Michael, so much for being on the podcast.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate your insight.
Cool. Thank you.